Hello.
So Joseph Campbell's hero's journey outlines 12 steps to transformation, closely aligning with Carl Jung's individuation integrating self wholeness. This synthesis offers profound insight. Hero gains a reward, realizing the integration of self, step toward wholeness, formed, sharing wisdom that benefits, fosters understanding. So please help me welcome Dr. Ken Hart.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're doing a little experiment. We're going to try and live stream it. And oh, testing. 1, 2, 3. How's that? Is that better? Testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Testing. Ibrahim, can you turn the volume up? Oh. Testing. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. So we can officially start. Ah. Oh, that's nice. Resonance. Okay. All right, next slide, please. I brought 2 different remotes. Neither of them are working. So next slide, please. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about the hero's journey. We will not be using all 12 steps. Originally, Campbell had 17 steps, and then they got reduced down to 12 by a Chris Volger, who wrote a book in 1998. And today I'll be talking about 7. So they have been distilled down from 17 to 12 to 7. All right. And we'll do a step-by-step analysis from a Jungian perspective. And this is a path. It's an inward path. It should say the hero's inward journey. Let's see if I can get this laser working. No. The hero's inward path. There's a word missing right here. The hero's inward. And this is also the heroine. So it applies to all human beings. Okay, next slide, please. This voyage of self-discovery, the image here is all wrong because it's an inward voyage. It's not, out in the outer world. It's in the inner world and in the mind. And so this ought not be a ship. This should be a submarine because it's going to do a deep dive, which is where the unconscious is. All right, next slide, please. And this is a simplified 4-stage theory. We have 3 stages. We have 3 phases. We have 4 phases. We have so the hero starts, and there's actually the call to adventure. We'll talk about that and what that is. That's the call to embark on this journey. And then during the journey, during this quadrant here, the purple quadrant, there's all of these ordeals and there's all of these obstacles. Obstacles to self-realization, obstacles to actualizing your fullest potential, obstacles to authenticity, obstacles to wholeness and inner unity. And then there's the unification. So I was thinking about unity when I saw unification. That's the wholeness, and that's the transformation. And then there's the return, the road back to the tribe. And so there are Holy Grail or the elixir, the gift that is given, which is the transformed consciousness. So the person comes back enlightened to the tribe, and then so it's not it's shared with others. Next slide, please. So here you see we start off with the ordinary world, and we'll talk about what that is. That's status quo. That's Okay, and then we go to the call comes, and I'll talk a lot about the call. And I'm not calling it the call to adventure. I'm calling it the call to self-realize. And the call comes from deep within yourself, from your sacred center. Jung calls it your self with a capital S, sacred self. And then the ego resists because of fear. And eventually, the unconscious wins, and the person makes a commitment, and they meet allies and mentors along the way. So these are assisting forces, these allies and mentors. There, allies and mentors. And then this is the road of trials. We call this initiation, Act 2. And then Act 3 is the return back home. There is transformation going on. There's inner transformation. And here, this looks like thorn, a crown of thorns. So that Jung believes that the unconscious communicates to us not in words. The language is symbols. And so we'll talk about some of these symbols like, for example, the cross, for example, a peace sign. These all communicate without words. They have meanings. They return to the tribe, and the tribe benefits from the person having a new state of consciousness, which you might call enlightenment. Next slide, please. So this is a Jungian map showing the heroine's or the hero's inner journey, and it starts with ego consciousness, so at the top, and then it ends where consciousness keeps evolving. And these are not just qualitative shifts. These are quantitative shifts. These are qualitative shifts. And so when the person arrives at the self, which I call the sacred self, they are said to be authentic. They are said to be whole and in tune with the indwelling divinity. So most of our natural talents, virtues, and strengths lie hidden from awareness in either the personal unconscious or the collective unconscious. So in order to get to the self, you have to go through these, and we'll talk about that process. Next, please. So here we have the ego. Everything above the water is your thinking mind. And as you can see, there's a lot submerged in the unconscious. So we start off with the personal unconscious, which is just unique to you. And then we go way down, and this is the collective unconscious, which is the shared unconscious. It's shared with all of humanity. So that's what we share in common. And so there are the three levels. And so we're talking about scuba diving, when you go down deep into the unconscious. You can't just be, sailing around on the top. And that's the difference between self-improvement and individuation, which is Jung's term for self-realization. So I'll talk about the difference between self-improvement, not the same as individuation or self-realization. One's just a little bit more of a cosmetic thing that makes the persona or the ego look better, but there's no foundational change. Next slide, please. So here we have another model here. Everything above the waterline right there is your conscious mind, and then everything under here is your unconscious mind. And there are two divisions in the unconscious mind. There's the personal unconscious mind, and then there's the collective unconscious. And as you can see, each of us, this right here is an ego. This is ego consciousness. So how many people here? 15. So there's 15 ego consciousness. Consciousness? I don't know how to do plural. And we all have our own personal unconscious, which is a record in this incarnation. And we'll talk about how material gets down here. It gets repressed into the unconscious. Both good virtues that you have that you repress and dark shadow stuff. So there's golden shadow stuff and light shadow stuff. And then the entire psyche is submerged in the collective unconscious, in this ocean. And there's billions of people on the planet Earth, and we're all submerged in this collective unconscious, this shared unconscious. And here is where the primordial archetypes, like the mother image, like the hero image. I mean, there's dozens and well, there's hundreds of actually primordial blueprints in the collective unconscious. Some of them become dominant, and some of them are latent, and they don't express themselves. But what gets expressed in Western society is the hero archetype. But that's not true in other cultures. Like if you go to the Far East or Tibet or something like that, there are some spiritually oriented archetypes. Like the wise old person, that's an archetype, And you see that in the movies. Next slide, please. So the islands seem separated. This is one ego, that's a second ego, third, fourth, fifth. But there's underlying unity. And there's that word again, unity. And so the hero's journey, the inward journey, it's not about conquering dragons or out there in the world, problem solving at work, or it's problem solving within your own psyche, and then you descend down. Right, personal unconscious. It's unique to this mountain, and then at the bottom there's a foundation that is shared by all of this mountain range. And I think this is a volcanic range. So you get the idea. Next slide, please. So this is a Jungian depiction of three, it's not psyches, it is three psyches. So that, person one with an ego, person two with an ego, person three with an ego. So they have different colors. Everything above the waterline is what the person is aware of. This is your thinking mind. But that's only a fraction of your entire mind, because there's an unconscious mind that you're not aware of. And so you're not aware of the personal unconscious at the beginning of the hero's journey. As you go through the journey, you go down and you explore the personal unconscious. And then once you get down to the base, you see all three of these are grounded in the shared unconscious, the collective unconscious. And these are where the archetypes be. What's going on here, there are these complexes. These are knots of emotions, and you detect them when a person has a ballistic overreaction, either a unreasonably negative trigger to something, uncharacteristic of them, and that means that their ego has been hijacked by a complex in the personal unconscious. But the ego can also get hijacked by something that expresses from the collective unconscious. And there are virtuous entities there, and then there are non-virtuous entities there. And some of them become dominant, some of them are not dominant. And there are literally thousands of these. And we're just going to talk about one of them, which is the hero, which is our culture nurtures it. Next slide, please. So Dr. Jung, if you look here across the top, known to self, not known to self. And here, not known to others, known to others. So I'll just give you a second to look at these four quadrants. Four quadrants of the psyche. And the psyche is a technical term for the mind, but it's nuanced, so I'll clarify. So this psyche includes the thinking mind and the unconscious mind, the mind that you're aware of and not aware of. So something that's known to self and known to others, known to self and not known to others. But this is where Jung concentrates, not known to self, but known to others. And this is where people will see you projecting your own issues onto others and seeing in others what in fact is true of you, which is, classic orange man in the White House maneuver. because everybody can, projection is confession. So, and then here, not known to self and not known to others. This will be the personal unconscious, and this will be the collective unconscious. And this is where Jung concentrates, that you have to, become aware. You have to raise the threshold or reduce the threshold so that you can see what is hidden. And then there's some reconciliation process going on, and there's some integration process going on. Because there's fragmentation when you start, and then over time the fragmentation lessens and lessens, and there's more coherence, and things get organized by the sacred self so that all the pieces in the puzzle fit in divine pattern. Next slide, please. All right, here's where we do a segue. Anybody seen any good Broadway plays? Lion King. Okay, how about Phantom? Yeah. Okay, Aladdin. All right, slow down, please. Okay, so here we have the playbill for the Lion King. By the way, this is a segue and a setup for the next section. Next slide, please. And here's the playbill for the Phantom of the Opera. Apparently, it just stopped running. It was the longest running. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so now we thank you, AI, for doing this for me. Thanks. Oh, time remaining? Yeah, that's what. No, we got 48 minutes remaining. So, if you're the timekeeper, I'm not interested in how much time has elapsed. I'm interested in how much is remaining. So, that probably should be 48 instead of 16. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I didn't explain the timekeeping. I'm just trying to keep on track so I know how fast or slow to go in terms of pacing. So at the very end, like at 1:45, you'll put the 16 sign-ups on. I'll have 16 minutes at 1:45, and then I'll be able to judge. So this is what we're going to talk about for the rest of today. We're going to talk about the theater of the mind, because there is a play going on in your own head, and there is a cast, and there's an ensemble. And all of these people, these personifications are different aspects of your psyche. And so we're going to talk about that play called The Hero's Inner Journey. But that play is actually now playing in Broadway at this theater of the mind. All right. Next, please. And this theater of the mind has this play called The Hero's Inner Journey, and this is a journey into the unconscious, both the personal unconscious and a journey into the collective unconscious. There are obstacles in there that have to be overcome by quote-unquote inner work. At the very, very end, we'll talk about these strategies for inner work, dream analysis, a number of different strategies to overcome these obstacles. And then on the other side would be a sense of authenticity. You start off feeling fake. It's called the persona. Feeling inauthentic, and then there's a shift after the 7th stage. Also, some of the processes are taken from alchemy, because this is where Jung got a lot of his ideas originally, is that he went to alchemy. And Claudia and I have been talking about, esoteric, alchemy, or mystical alchemy, or Gnostic alchemy, or whatever, you have a different vocabulary. And Jung really got into that. And then he took a lot of his ideas, like dissolution and, those processes, to overcome these obstacles, to get to the other side, which is all about authenticity and wholeness and coherence. Next slide, please. So here we have the theater of the mind, and now playing for a limited time only is the hero's inner journey. And that's what we're going to do today, is I'll take you through this hero's inner journey. Next slide, please. And I just want to highlight that, the hero's inner journey, all roles in the ensemble are played by the same actor. And that's you. That's actually your psyche, or we'll talk about the difference between the psyche and then the sacred self. But there is a conductor of the orchestra who coordinates everything, and that's the sacred self. Jung calls it self with a capital S. He doesn't use the word sacred, but it is indwelling divinity. All right. So, okay, stop right there. I'll take you through the playbill of the inner's journey. You saw the playbill for Phantom. You saw the playbill for Lion King. And so next slide, please. So here's the plot summary. Let me read that. There's some typos, right? Each of us has the potential to summon hidden courage and to be the hero who overcomes obstacles to self-actualization. Courage. Claudio and I were talking, and he used the word bravery. And that's the inverse of fear. So you need to have a bravery, and you need to access that virtue from the personal unconscious. You need to access that virtue from the collective unconscious. And who has that virtue in spades? The hero archetype. So you on your own, your ego, you can't do it on your own. You need assisting force that has the virtue because it's hidden from your awareness. It's hidden from, according to Jung, from your thinking mind. So each of us has the potential to summon hidden courage and to be the hero. And by the way, that's why he called it hero. The hero's journey is, the hero is a person who has unusual amount of courage, because it takes a lot of courage to go on this journey, because there's suffering involved when you come face to face with these obstacles. But in the process of overcoming the obstacles, you are transformed and made new. So it's difficult, but it's really rewarding when you get through it. I don't think too many people get through it. I think people, give up because it's just too arduous. But that's another story. So feeling there must be more in life than the status quo mindset. So status quo is the first of the 7 stages in the hero's journey. That's our normal, everyday awareness. So feeling there must be more to life than the status quo mindset, the star of the show, and you'll get to see the star, it's called ego consciousness. And it's represented, I personify it as a woman, because there's more females here than males. So feeling that there must be more to life than status quo mindset, the star of the show, ego consciousness, here's a call to change. So it's not a call to adventure. It's a call to change. Change yourself. Transform from a inauthentic personality to an authentic personality. Here's a call to change. After developing openness, they are pulled out of their unsatisfying way of living, because status quo, business as usual, is unsatisfying, and people are yearning. There's got to be more, and that's what. And the call, by the way, is coming from the sacred self. The call is coming from the indwelling divinity, which is the conductor of the symphony. Organizing, so everything is harmonious and there's no conflicting and fragmentation. Everything works together. So in hopes of finding their magic elixir, which is authenticity or wholeness or enlightenment or Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness. You just keep on adding labels to it in hopes of finding their magic elixir. And this is a term that comes right from alchemy, right? This is alchemical term. They find themselves on a strenuous path of danger and discovery. Strenuous danger and discovery. Discovery of spooky things, but discovery of also wonderful virtues that you never knew you had. But you have to go through the dark to get to the light. You can't just go around, according to Jung. Strenuous danger. No wonder you need courage. No wonder it's called the hero. The hero has courage. You know, it's not called the wimp's journey. It's called the hero's. You know, so it's not like they have big muscles. They have, you know, character. But it's not theirs. They're accessing it from hidden parts of themselves that they have been alienated from. They're accessing it from orphaned parts. I really like the metaphor of orphaned parts of yourself. If you're into Richard Schwartz, you know, in parts, you know, I think one of his most recent books is called No Bad Parts. And so it's inner family systems, right? Yeah. So this is very similar to that. Well, not very similar, but somewhat similar. So in hopes of finding their magic elixir, becoming authentic and whole, they find strenuous, but powerful forces become allies in the struggle. Powerful forces, like the wise elderly person, the sacred self. These powerful forces are not from without. These powerful forces are in the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. And there are techniques to try that Jung has developed and others to access these. Powerful forces become allies in the struggle. So they have obstacles and they have allies. Without the allies, they could never get around the obstacles. They could never go through the obstacles. They could never fight the inner battles just on ego power alone. They need, you know. Okay, so powerful forces become allies in the struggle to face, assimilate. And we'll talk about facing shadow aspects. By the way, the word shadow is just a generic term for everything you're not aware of about yourself. So it's the shadow covers the personal unconscious. The shadow covers the collective unconscious. So, you know, nothing mystical about that. But the hero is struggling to face these obstacles, to assimilate, transcend the opponents of fear and doubt. Yeah, so they have these opponents. They have these quote-unquote foes, but the foes turn out not to be foes. In the process of fighting these foes, they befriend the foes, and they form an alliance. And this is called the transcendent function. And hopefully we can, you know, because this really borrows heavily from alchemy, which is the reconciliation of polar opposites, the yin-yang symbol, right? All right. Gradually, as the doors of perception begin to open, the star of the show, ego consciousness, by this time, this is not the same ego consciousness that started the journey. This is a totally different ego consciousness. It's not even, you can't even call it ego consciousness. But gradually, as the doors of perception begin to open, doors of perception to a new reality within. The star of the show transforms recognition. They return to their tribe as someone who is centered in their soul, not their head. I really like that, the way that's put. They're centered in their soul, not their head. They start off feeling that there must be more to status quo mindset because they're just stuck in their head. I mean, they're just so alienated from their soul. And so it's a journey to the soul, right? There's tons of ways to think about it, according to Jung. And that is the hero's inner journey. Next slide, please. So there's a cast of characters featuring the conscious mind in the starring role. And you'll get to see her in a second. She's a star, and she's pretty arrogant about that. So we have the stage name and the real name. The conscious mind, that's ego awareness. That's that tip of the iceberg that's above the waterline. That's everything that you're aware of. Then there's the personal unconscious. You saw that already, and it's played by itself. We have the shared unconscious mind, and technically it's called the collective unconscious. And that's primordial. It is primordial, and it is universal. Then we have the persona, which is very similar to the conscious mind, but this is the mask that you put on for others. And sometimes you know that you're just putting on an act for whatever, because it has functional utility. So the persona, and then there's stagnation. These are the knots in the personal unconscious. Jung calls them complexes. And they're, I think about them as energy vortex. And what happens is ego defense mechanism, we project it out. We disown it. We don't own it. We see it in others. And so we are triggered by others in either a good way, like we fall madly in love with them head over heels, idealize them and pedestalize them, right? That's the lover archetype, right? Which is dominant. But actually that's not, this is the personal unconscious, so that's different. That example. But it's whenever a person is overreactive and everybody around themselves saying, that's not at all, that's not them, And we're going to be talking about the ego getting hijacked by complexes in the personal unconscious, and the ego getting, or the persona getting hijacked by energies in the collective unconscious. And then people do things that are very uncharacteristic of them, and then they wonder, and everybody wonders, what happened? What came over them? And that's what happens when you don't integrate, that's what happens when you orphan parts of yourself and you're fragmented. These fragmented parts sabotage because they want to rejoin the family and be part of the whole. Okay. Next slide, please. So a few more cast of characters. Stage name, the psyche. This is the totality that encompasses the thinking mind and the subconscious. You'll see some Venn diagrams in a second. So there'll be, a big circle, and within it is the personal unconscious. Within it is the collective unconscious. But the big circle is called the psyche. And then there are the universal primordial personalities, and these are the archetypes, like the wise old person, the mother, Mother Teresa, the trickster, the lover, the hero. That's the one we're going to focus on today. Thanks. And then there's the divine conductor. So I added a qualification, sacred self. And that is the master archetype. Like there are thousands of them. I'll talk about 4 or 5 of them just because you're probably familiar. You've probably heard those names before. But this is the master one. And that's the indwelling divinity right there. All roles in the ensemble are played by the same actor, just to remind you again. So next slide, please. So we're going to talk about 3 acts. Act 1. These are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are the Campbell stages in the hero's journey. Each of these stages is, I think of it as an inflection point. And so it's not, it's descending into the unconscious, but it's not a linear descent. You're going like that, and then you go like that, and then you get closer and closer to the sacred center. So it's not linear. These are inflection points. 7 well, there's actually 6 inflection points, and this is the result of this last one. You know, you're transformed and you return to the tribe as a butterfly. And I use the word butterfly because, you know, it connotes the metamorphosis that's going on here. And I'll show, you know, it starts off with the larva and then, you know, the chrysalis. And so, you know, that's a really apt metaphor for what's going on here. So it starts off with status quo. We'll talk a little bit more receiving and resisting the call. So you receive the call, and this will be done on a stage, the stage of your mind. And so ego consciousness is standing on the stage, and then you'll see a trap door, and then they'll hear a call coming. That's the subconscious. And they will receive the call to change, and then they will resist the call to change. Eventually, they will resolve to, well, some of them. I don't know. I don't have statistics on what % of the people who receive the call actually heed the call. Then there's crossing the threshold, which is where you make 100% commitment that you're going to transform your consciousness. And you go to Unity Minister School and you get your divinity degree, and you know you become a reverend in Windsor. I mean that's crossing the threshold and making a commitment, right? Then there's encountering the obstacles and allies. We talked about that earlier. There's the transformational deal. There's usually one, like in you know, Star Wars. You saw Luke Skywalker went into the cave, right? And then what did he see? He saw his father, right? And so that was a transformational ordeal. Sometimes if you don't have enough ego strength or the allies aren't there, like Obi-Wan Kenobi is not there to guide you, like the wise elder, you can be crushed. So this is kind of dangerous. It can be dangerous. You know, you can't just, you know, be flippant about it. And then there's internal reconfiguration and integration. I really like how that is phrased. Internal reconfiguration and integration. Because I'll show you in a minute what the chaotic lack of configuration, the chaos, where all the parts in the symphony are not, you know, cooperating with each other. And then I'll talk a lot about this thing called integration, which involves reconciliation into the whole. Okay, I've been orphaned you and repressed you into the unconscious, and now I'm reaching out and I want you to join the family with everybody else so that we can, you know, be whole. And then there's the return to the tribe as the butterfly. But you didn't start off as butterfly. You started off as just a little egg. And then you went through all of these inflection points. So I'm using a lot of metaphors. Next slide, please. So I'll let you just take a look at this for a second. So here we are again in the theater. You see the drapes, and this is the theater of the mind. And then, you know, there's the ensemble for the repertory season, which is the hero's inner journey. Next season, it'll be something else. I talked about the trickster. Here's the hero. There's, that's AI's idea of the hero. Anima, which is the female energy in men. There's another hero there too. Hey, you get a choice. There's the wise old person. It can be a crone. It can be female. The animus is the masculine energy in the collective unconscious in women. And that has to be integrated. Because some women are have orphaned that energy because society frowns upon it, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's an imbalance between the masculine and feminine psychic energy. And then there's the golden shadow. So, and then there's the persona. You can see there, it's all, every time you see persona, you see the masks. So, and sometimes when the ego consciousness, this person's the ego consciousness, and sometimes when they wear the mask, they can identify too strongly with the mask, and then they have an identity crisis, and they believe that they are someone who they are not. So that's the inauthentic self. And so individuation or self-realization is a process. Take this mask off, take that mask off, take that mask off. You're stripping it down. And then what's at the end is the true you, the true you. All right. So the theater of the mind. This is the sacred self. That is the supreme or paramount archetype. And these are these energies, these personalities, like the mother, like, all right. Next slide, please. Yeah. I don't know. That's AI made a boo-boo. It says TikTok. That's nothing. That's a mistake. It's a boo-boo. Yeah. Yeah. The trickster? Okay. Anybody want to take a shot at that? The trickster? Yep. Claudia? Oh, okay, so we're going to talk about symbols that come from the unconscious or the collective unconscious, and you're talking about a raven or a crow. But a trickster is a person who, like a jester, in the king's court or the queen's court. And they will be like a glad fly, and they will, try to get people to think, and they will be anti-conformists. Not like the persona. The persona is very woke. Oh, yeah. But the trickster, no woke there. Yes? Not necessarily. Not necessarily in terms, there are wheels, and I'll show you a wheel, and you'll get to see, there's 4 quadrants, and you'll see where the trickster falls, because there's 3 other in that quadrant, and then you'll see where the hero falls. Some of them emphasize a motif of spirituality. Some of them emphasize a motif of interpersonal relations and connecting with others. Some of them, like the hero, the motif there is accomplishing and exerting power to achieve goals in the world. Next slide, please. So here we are, the star of the show, which is running for 1 season, and she will come on stage first, and she will say, "It's all about me." And that's true. I mean, the thinking mind, thinks that, it's at the top of the stagecoach, or it's in the stagecoach, and that they don't realize there's somebody up there called the sacred self who's, in the wild, wild west. It's whoever's on top of the stagecoach, is in charge. But anyway, so the passenger here mistakenly thinks that they're... So look at this trap door. Everything on the main floor of the stage is your thinking mind. Think about a house. So we live on the main floor. And the call that hopefully she'll receive is coming from down here. It's coming from the personal unconscious in the basement, in the cellar, or it's coming from the collective unconscious in the basement, in the cellar. And it's a call to change. It's a call to find a new way of being. So that's supposed to be spiritual essence coming out of there. But most people don't think they, all right. Okay, next slide, please. So here we have the end of the hero's journey at the very, very end, where you're who you were meant to be always. You have actualized your true self. To thine own self be true. Now, this egg, this ego consciousness, this woman who thinks it's all about her, she has no idea that she has the potential to become this. She thinks this is the be-all and end-all. And then she ends up going on the hero. And all of these are inflection points. And, we'll talk about, Gnostic alchemy or whatever brand of alchemy. And what goes on in the chrysalis is really, it's just straight out alchemy, right? Because, it just becomes pudding. And it just becomes mush. But it's all divinely orchestrated, and out of that mush or out of that pudding, comes an unformed butterfly, and then, that's quite a transformation. And we think that we can't change, we can't achieve God consciousness. That is God consciousness. But the egg doesn't think, oh, there's no way. So the hero's metamorphosis of consciousness. So that's another way of thinking about the hero's journey. What is it? It is a series of metamorphoses of consciousness. And these are not just quantitative changes, like they are qualitative inflection points. There's new entities. There's new psychic entities being formed. I brought some demonstrations. We don't have time for it. But I do have some vinegar, and I do have some baking soda in a box there. And I was just going to pour the vinegar and the baking soda, and then it was going to go woof. It was just foam over. So that is one of these inflection points, but that's a metaphor for what happens to your consciousness. You take this element in the psyche and that element in the psyche, and apart, nothing happens. But when you align them and they merge, something original and new develops, a new consciousness. And that's what integration is. That's the metaphor for integration. All right. Next slide, please. So here we have the persona, which is the mask we wear, and we have hundreds of masks. And behind it is, your thinking mind, your ego consciousness, the everyday status quo state of mind. And much of the time, the ego knows that it's not the persona, that it's just putting on an act. And in different circumstances at different times, it'll take that mask off and put another mask on because they have different functional utility in different situations. I have to be seen as moralistic and I have to be seen as trustworthy. And then the ego might know, I'm not, sometimes I'm not trustworthy at all. Sometimes I'm not moral at all. But they have to act that way. And then in all this dark stuff is the shadow, which is the positive shadow, the golden shadow, and the negative shadow. The shadow is just a term for everything that is in the basement and not seen by the thinking mind. And so they're, personal unconscious and collective unconscious in the shadow. All right, next slide, please. So I'll let you read this, the persona. A social face. That's great. We present it to the world. The mask metaphor is apt. So on the one hand, it's designed to make a definite impression. So this is all about impression management in order to avoid punishing consequences, impression management to avoid punishing consequences, impression management in order to obtain desirable consequences. So get the good and avoid the bad. And on the other hand, it conceals the true nature of the individual. This conceals the true nature. And that's the quest of the hero, is to unconceal to self what is my true nature. That's called authenticity. So this is a quest to strip away all the mask at each stage in the 6 stages leading to the 7th. Okay, so next stage, next slide, please. I love this slide. Doesn't that depict before the journey? This is status quo. This is everyday consciousness. Total lack of integration. Total lack of harmony, just chaos. At the end, all the pieces will come together like they're supposed to. But here you got this terrible fragmentation going on. And at some level, the ego hears the call that, hey, man, you got to do something about this. You just can't carry on, well, you can, but it's going to take a lot of courage to get your head together, metaphorically. Okay. So next slide. So again, before embarking on the hero's inner journey, at the end of the journey, these things are all integrated, all these pieces. So the internal family systems kind of thing. And all these things here are fragmented bits that you have orphaned, because that's the only thing left. And you don't like this, you suppress that. Right? You might have been really, really smart in school when you were a youngster, and then you got bullied and teased, and then you had to disown your intellect. So you have these golden virtues that you have disowned, and they're just submerged. You have no idea that they're there. So it's not just, negative stuff, dark shadow stuff, but there's golden shadow stuff, virtues and the vices. But the virtues and the vices will eventually come together and work in harmony. They won't be enemies with each other. There's something called holding the tension, and that's where the yin-yang symbol comes in. And this is also in alchemy, is that the transformed ego is able to live with paradox, that there are polarities within the psyche, and that it learns that's okay, and I can live with those contradictions. That's pretty cool, because I can't live with those. I want to get rid of one of them. All right, next slide, please. So we're going to talk about the divided mind. So on the right side, we have the conscious mind, we have the persona, and then we have the ego. And then on the other side of this divide, this is all in the unconscious mind. Conscious mind, unconscious mind. And so now we're disaggregating the unconscious mind. Thanks. We have, really everything here is shadow, but we have the anima animus, and then we have the sacred self, which is the indwelling divinity. These are both archetypes. Again, anima is for men, the feminine energy, which typically they're alienated from. And so there's an imbalance. And that causes trouble. And then for women, they are alienated from the masculine energy. And there's an imbalance, and that causes trouble. So there has to be some sort of a reconciliation, and there has to be an effort to establish a relationship with the feminine part in men. There has to be an effort to establish a relationship with the masculine part in women. There's a reaching out. And we'll talk about how that is done in Jungian analysis. And one of them is called active imagination. You have a conversation. You've heard about the empty chair technique, right? So just imagine that there's a part of your personality in that chair, and you have a dialogue with it, and then you imagine what it says back to you. It's more sophisticated than that. It involves mindful awareness. But we'll get to that. Okay, so we got 30 minutes left. Say it a little louder. Yeah, some of the ego seems to be a little bit aware of some of the shadow stuff. And this is probably someone who's on the hero's journey, because that's what they're doing, is they're looking for shadow stuff. We're going to talk about analysis of projection at the very end. And so there is vigilance and to noticing when you have been triggered. And Jung thinks that's really important to notice. Why am I overreacting so much to that person who's doing something that's really annoying? Oh, come to think of it, I do that, and I have done that, and I hate that about myself, and so I'm disowning it, and I'm going to project it out. But it's not just a negative trigger. You can be triggered, you can fall madly in love with someone, and you overreact in a positive way. Pedestalizing. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So before embarking on the inner journey, people suffer from internal fragmentation. So again, divided. Look at that divide. Isn't this depicting a lack of unity, a lack of cohesiveness? Isn't that what the Unity Spiritual Center of Windsor is trying to, mend that gap so that these opposing forces, so we have these polar opposites, we have these contradictory energies within us, and they exist, and we have to learn how to reconcile that and, quote unquote, hold the tension. Jung uses that phrase a lot, and it's in a container. But at the beginning of the journey, the ego just doesn't have the capacity to hold that tension. It's going to get, there's going to be some damage done if you try to do it prematurely. So these are contradictory opposites, and we all have them. And then we have to learn how to live with them. And what you do is you end up getting in touch with this part and getting in touch with this part and having them have a conversation. They might not agree. They might violently disagree, but at least they're conversing. Whereas at the start, there's no conversation at all. This one's way over there and this one's way over there. So it's not as if they have to become, best buddies. But you can see this lack of cohesiveness right here. Next slide, please. So before embarking on the journey, there's an identity crisis going on here. This wolf thinks it in sheep's clothing. Well, I'm going to trick everybody. And sometimes the wolf will trick its own self. Right? And so this is inauthenticity. This is just an example. Next slide, please. So here we'll shift to the Temple of Apollo in Delphi. So this is ancient Greece. Next slide, please. And on the wall as you go in is this saying. Who knows what the saying is? Yeah, to thine own self be true. Yeah, know thyself. To thine own self be true. And that is the goal of the hero's journey, to be true to one's own self, but not to be true to one's ego consciousness. That's not your true self. Not to be true to your persona, but to be true to your true self. So I've just modified the priestess, the oracle of Delphi should have said to thy true self be true, to thine own self. But maybe there was a capital S originally in the sacred self, the indwelling divinity. To thine indwelling divinity be true. That's the translation for me and Jung. Okay, next slide, please. So what is individuation? Here, this is status quo. This is before embarking on the journey. Here we have the thinking mind. And then here we have the unconscious mind. This is the conscious mind. This is the unconscious mind. And there's no relationship. The conscious mind is oblivious to the fact that there's an unconscious mind down there in the cellar. So she ends up turning around and facing that way and trying to get the attention of the orphaned parts to establish communication. And that really takes a lot of courage because it's a scary kind of a thing to do. All right, next slide, please. So here we have popular misconception. So in all the Hollywood movies, Harry Potter, Star Wars, you have this call to adventure. And there you have, who's that? That's Gandalf? Who's that? Yeah. And then you have this fight going on, right? There's Luke Skywalker and his father, trials and ordeals. And then they return triumphant and transformed. And there's all these rewards. But it's not an external journey at all. This is the popular misconception about the hero's journey. Jung says it's all about internal, not external. So that's a popular misconception. Next slide, please. So here we have the ego plummeting down, discovering riches located in the infinite depth of the unconscious mind. I love that. The infinite depth. Infinity, right? Think about the indwelling divinity. That has infinite depth. And that's what they're doing. But that's and everything up here is the conscious mind above the surface. But as you go down, everything becomes dark, meaning dark is a metaphor for unconscious. Because you can't see. If you don't have a flashlight and you go in your basement, you can't see anything. It's like it doesn't exist. So shining light, there's a lot of metaphors involving light. Reverend David, always talks about that as a metaphor, for, becoming progressively more spiritually enlightened. Enlightened with a light. Enlightened, L-I-G-H-T. Next slide, please. But imagine how much courage it takes to go down. Plenty lies beneath the surface. Look at it. So Jung made a big deal about that. Everybody here is just sort of surfing on the top, and this is all about self-improvement, just skimming the surface, and this is self-realization. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to make a transition. We're going to talk about this voyage of self-discovery, and this should be a submarine, and then people, maybe there are divers, we don't know. They could have scuba gear going down, Okay, next slide. But self-discovery. Oh, by the way, back up just a little bit, Ibrahim. Self-discovery. Discovery of the self. Discovery of the sacred self. Discovery of the indwelling divinity. Not discovery of the ego. Not discovery of all the multiple personas that we have. Not that kind of self-discovery. That's all just self-improvement. You'll see an image here about the difference between self-improvement and self-realization. Okay, look at this. This woman underwater. She's dancing, right? With this, whatever beast that is, discovering and befriending dark aspects of your shadow. How much courage does this person have to have? So trust in the divine process. Trust in what the divine conductor wants you to do or is guiding you to do. So discovering, and they use the word uncovering a lot. I mean, it's like psychological archaeology. You dig down, oh, there's some old Egyptian stuff down there, 7,000 years old. You keep going down into the unconscious. So it's uncovering or discovering, and then befriending. So we're not talking about becoming best friends. We're talking about establishing a communication. It's all about establishing communication to an orphan part of yourself that you threw in the garbage. You locked it in the basement and put 20 padlocks on it. Take all the padlocks off, open it up, and hey, you open to reconciliation here. And so all the pieces can come back together, and then you can become a coherent whole instead of a fragmented. Okay, next slide, please. So discovering the treasure of your golden shadow. So it's not just encountering some vicious stingrays in the unconscious, but and you do disown how your tendency to be dishonest or your tendency to your desire to cheat or whatever. But also we tend to disown our virtues. And so we can discover the treasure. And that's used a lot, this metaphor of discovering your hidden potential. And they talk about the treasure. So this is your golden shadow. And they use that word intentionally. Sometimes it's called the light shadow. I like the word golden shadow. Look at the color gold here. Later on, you'll see some images, and you'll see the sacred self is emanating gold from the heart. A color. Okay, next slide, please. So here we have the difference. I don't even have to talk about it. Look. Again, individuation, self-realization. So one's at the surface level, it's just cosmetic, put a new mask on and, polish up this mask. It's got some scratches on it. So you look better in the eyes of others and, but there's no fundamental change. I mean, basic change. I mean, at the foundational level. So no wonder people don't want to go into Jungian analysis. Because this is like the egg, the larva, and then it gets into the chrysalis, and it gets into the chrysalis, and then it just decomposes. And that's what this is. The ego doesn't want to decompose. The ego just wants to look better. It doesn't want to fundamentally change. Right? Okay, next slide, please. So the hero's journey of mind expansion. Now I'm using the word mind expansion for the first time. Before the journey, everyday awareness. I love that. Everyday awareness. Look at that. Just task-focused. There's no inner reflection. It's just accomplish the goals that society wants you to accomplish. And then here, after the journey, when you get to the end and you become authentic and whole, I'm calling it now cosmic awareness. But there we have the lotus. I mean, this is very Buddhist here. Okay, got 15 minutes, thanks. So you see this transformation, and this is this metamorphosis. Next slide, please. Before, that's status quo. Before, and look at these strings. Society's pulling all these strings. There's no autonomy here. There's no agency here. This person thinks they have autonomy. They think they have agency, but no. They're just a puppet. So you become your own self. Authenticity. No mask. And there's something wrong with this dwarf person here. I couldn't understand. I told AI to make her legs longer, and it just wouldn't do it. It wouldn't do it. 15 minutes later, I kept on giving it thumbs down. It didn't respond. All right. But look at all the shoulds that society puts on the inauthentic person. And here, look at this. There's going to be a reward here if they give a good speech. You see, it's all about extrinsic approval. They don't care about intrinsic approval, like self-acceptance. It's just other acceptance. So, all right. But look at this person here, authenticity. And with authenticity comes humility. Because the authentic personality recognizes that the self, with the capital S, the sacred self, is really in charge. It's just a player in the orchestra. It's not the conductor. So there's that recognition, and with it comes humility. And that makes the person really easy to live with their family, friends, and kin. So there's no power stuff. There's no superiority and putting down. Right? So next slide, please. Here we have a man. So he's got the same puppet strings, and he's seeking applause, and he's seeking success, worldly success. He wants to be in control, right? But then, after going through the hero's journey, the phrase authentic ego is awkward because it's a transformed ego. We need a new name for it, Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is some images of the evolution of the consciousness. Start off with the primitive mind. So this is status quo, before you heed the call to change. So you're real basically controlled by fear, If you do the wrong thing, there's going to be punishment consequences. People are not going to like you, people are going to reject you. And then as you're going along these inflection points, then there's ego awakening, and then at the very end, self-realization, which Jung calls individuation. That's becoming your own self. You become an individual, but he called it individuation. You're not a puppet to society's expectations. You march to your own drummer, not in an antisocial kind of a way, but in a uniquely creative, idiosyncratic kind of a way. Not against society, but in harmony with society. Yeah, some people might think you're eccentric, but they're not going to throw you in jail for being self-realized. All right, next slide, please. So here's another evolution. The first primitive consciousness, status quo, business as usual, and then there's this middle stage, the transitional stage, and there's labyrinth, and then there's more sophisticated. So I use the word primitive, transitional, and sophisticated, different kinds of vocabulary to talk about, different types of consciousness. I don't know if that's the right, but there's the sacred self right there. Right? There. It's just gold. Right? All right. Next slide. Yeah, popular misconception is that the shadow is home to the worst parts of ourself, but it's actually home to the rejected parts. Not the worst parts, the rejected parts. And there can be some positive rejected parts. And for this reason, it's full of untapped potential and creativity. Jung makes a big deal about how people become vastly more creative after they become integrated and after they finish the hero's journey. All right, and look, there's the golden shadow, the light shadow, making friends with the dark shadow. Whereas at the start, they were enemies. There's no way that they would embrace each other. So that's just a metaphor. I mean, this is like... All right. Next slide, please. And that's all happening at the unconscious level. All right. So in order to achieve authenticity and wholeness, the courage of a true hero or heroine is a must. This journey is not going to work unless you have the courage of a true hero. I would say most people chicken out. And so here, the unconscious contains both the feared and the wondrous. Look, at the same time, the feared and then the wondrous. And there's a mixed bag when you go down there. The disowned virtues, but then the disowned vices. And how to hold the tension that you've got both, the Jekyll and the Hyde, in there. Next slide, please. So the heroine's journey, awakening to the oneness of the underlying foundation of the unifying mountain range. This is a volcanic range. Awakening to the oneness of the underlying foundation. And when I was reading this, when I was creating this phrase, I was thinking about the ground of being, Paul Tillich, ground of being, the ground of being, the underlying foundation. So if you strip everything away, you strip everything away, and the cosmos vanishes, the underlying foundation, the ground of being, is still there. So anyway, but when you get down to that level, I mean, that's the hero's journey. You start here and then you have to get down there. All right? And then you see that you've got this shared humanity going on, this shared humanity. All right, next slide, please. So what are the processes that produce? I think I can do this in, 10 minutes? Okay. Yeah? What are the processes that produce transformation? Okay, just leave it right there. Dream analysis, yeah. Like Freud, Jung said dream analysis is the royal road to the unconscious. The royal road to the unconscious. And so clients will be encouraged to keep a diary. And the symbols that come up in the diary are all symbolic. And we're going to talk about how you interpret these symbols, because the unconscious does not speak English or any human language. It communicates in symbols, visual imagery, stuff like that. Synchronicities. All right, next one. Another process, awareness of and insight into synchronicity. My brother, who lives in Barcelona, has now got a job in China. He is in Beijing right now. And he is having what I'm calling an avalanche of synchronicity. You should see the messages that I'm getting from him, one after the other, to the other. And so it's being alert to the synchronicities, awareness, like vigilance, and then using, noticing, and then having insight into the meaning. Jung is always talking about meaning making. It's not enough to just notice. You got to make meaning out of these signs. Next one. Awareness of and insight into symbolic communication from the unconscious mind. Okay, so we're going to get some examples of symbolic communication. Often it uses metaphors and analogies, but it can actually use visual images and symbols that have meaning. So next one. So let's see if we can get some examples. The symbolic language of the unconscious. So what does this symbolize? What does this communicate to you? What does it mean? Yeah. In this case, it could be romantic love, maybe. Okay, so that's the motif. So you might be getting this image coming to your awareness in dreams, or you might be just sitting in your lazy boy chair, and all of a sudden, you're daydreaming, and then this heart appears. Well, that's the subconscious talking to you. And so people don't really notice it, and then you have to make meaning out of it. You know, you got to, well, I don't want to use the word interpret, but, you know. Okay, next one. So what does this mean? Peace. Any other synonyms? Tree of life, yeah. Harmony, yeah, peace, harmony. So this might present itself in your mind's eye or come to your awareness from the external environment, or you might notice it in a dream and you keep a diary and you're going, that was weird. I saw somebody with the necklace and it had the, you know, the hippie peace sign. I wonder what that's about. And then you start making meaning. And especially if you get 2 or 3 of those together in a string, then pay extra close attention. The subconscious is trying to get your attention. Okay, next, well, there's some text here. Okay. So staying alert and ascribing meaning to symbols that appear in your consciousness, either daydreaming, actual dreaming, or in the external environment. Okay. So this is the way the unconscious speaks. Next slide. Symbols. Okay, so what does this mean? Okay, what does yin and yang mean? Yeah, the tension. Okay. Okay, so what does it mean for you? Yes, the contradiction of polar opposites, the conjoining, in this case, of dualities into a unity, into a one. Well, you can interpret that way, but typically it's interpreted as unity of opposites. And Jung makes a big deal about this. He has a process, and I think it's from the sacred self, it's called the transcendent power, the transcendent, what is it called? But what it does is it takes contradictions and merges them. Okay, so the example of a cup. The inside is not the same as the outside, but together the inside and the outside make a whole. So that's the metaphor here. And so it's taking disparate fragments, but usually it's the reconciliation of opposites, and it's holding the tension, yin and yang. Okay, this thing contradicts that thing, but then somehow reconciling that. The ego can't never do that. The sacred self has to do that. No, you can't have one with the other, but to embody it and to realize it. You know, so that's a conceptual idea, but here it's embodied and realized, yeah. Okay. And that is the truth. This is basic truth, but, you know. Next. What does this mean? And I'm looking for something not the Christian church. I'm looking for a quality. What does it communicate? Intersection, yeah. You get the human plane and the divine plane, but Claudia? Yeah, manifest. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I've seen it in the literature as love. Not the heart love that you have for your life partner, but this is a spiritual love. God is love, right? How many times do we talk about love in our communications, Claudio? So this is a spiritual love, not a romantic or interpersonal love or the love of humanity, you know. Okay, next. So this is what the unconscious is doing. If this comes to your awareness, and you see a person with a cross on it, and then later in the day you see another person with a cross on their wrist thing, and then you know, driving down the street and there's a cross, and oh my God! I mean, all these synchronicities. You know, it's coming to you. Maybe you should pay attention and try to make meaning of this. You might be in a MAGA rally, and so the meaning of that is to get out of Dodge. Okay. We're almost at the end. So what are the processes that produce transformation or metamorphosis, right? That egg into the butterfly. Analysis of triggers in service of shadow work. I don't think we have time because we've only got 30 seconds left. But that's when you overreact, and basically you're projecting your own issues onto them, and you're disowning it, but you see it in them. But you become mindful, and you notice, and then you analyze. Why did I overreact in a positive way? Why am I so madly in love with that person? Why do I think they're the best thing since sliced cheese? I mean, I just over the top. Everybody, I'm just raving about this thing or this artwork or whatever it is. It's just way over the top. So it's an exaggerated positive trigger or exaggerated negative trigger. Basically, you've disowned. There's an orphan part of yourself that you don't want to own, and you project it out. Active imagination, that's the next slide, and then alchemical. Claudio, can you just give one example of an alchemical process that produces transformation? Just one. Okay, connecting with the inner. So I'm thinking about the beacons and the pouring the lead and the gold, and then using that as a metaphor. So you start off with the status quo, which is the fragmented ego, which is the lead, and then turn it in through alchemical processes. And so that's where Jung got a lot of his ideas, and he just said, no, we're not dealing with material reality, we're talking about psychological or psycho-spiritual. I don't know why he doesn't use the word psycho-spiritual, but I'm always translating it. It's not psychological, it's not spiritual, it's emerging. So, yeah, I was thinking about dissolution, and then I was thinking about, interaction. Yeah, but that happens metaphorically at the psychological level. And that's what these inflection points are all about. Okay, so a little bit about active imagination, then we'll be done. Next slide, please. So I'll just ask you to look at that. So here we have the theater of the mind, and we have, in this case, egoic consciousness. This is a metaphor for status quo consciousness. So I had to present it visually, and it's not very virtuous. And then here, I am a hidden part of her mind. And using creative daydreaming to talk to a hidden part of yourself, Jung calls that active imagination. So you see, there is a line of communication established. This consciousness is reaching down into this awareness is reaching down into the unconscious and trying to establish a connection with an orphan part, a virtuous orphan part of themselves. And it's called active imagination. And it involves mindful awareness and repeated willingness to invite that fragmented part of the self is safe to talk to me. And it's not going to talk to you in English or any human language. It's going to send symbols. And if you keep at it, and you know, mindful, you have to rest in the gap between the thoughts. I mean, you just have to be in the zone. And then, you know, the still small voice, just a whisper. But it might not come as a word. It might just come as something like an image in your head, or the next day or the next week. Something happens that you think is a response because you keep on inviting this. So these they're alienated from each other, you know, at the first step, status quo, and then you just establish a relationship. That's all you're trying to do. All right, next slide. Hey, all right, we're at the end. And we only went over a couple minutes, so thank you. Thank you. Yes, yes. Yes, the metamorphosis from egg. Yeah, you just don't magically. Yeah, because a butterfly is not actualizing its potential if it's, you know, its wings are all sucked into its body because there's goo all over it. It's like an airplane. An airplane sitting on the tarmac for all eternity is not actualizing its potential. And the butterfly has to spread its wings in order to be its true self. Oh, in the chrysalis? And that's the best metaphor for the value of struggle in the hero's journey, because you keep on encountering all these obstacles and you develop, I don't know if you want to call it spiritual muscle, I don't know what to call it, but you get transformed, just like at the gym. You know, it's struggling to realize its true self. And who has orchestrated all that is the self with the capital S, the sacred self, or the indwelling divinity. And it's saying, you can do it, you can do it. And maybe it can't do it on its own, but we have assisting forces. You have allies within yourself. You have these resources that you know nothing about. And you can call on them. Yes? The wise elder. So they give you wisdom. That's all. That archetype is all about, you know, these primordial personalities that are in the collective unconscious and the shared unconscious. There are wise elders going back thousands of years in all cultures. So you can call on that if you need wisdom. If you need bravery and courage, then you call on the hero archetype. So, but there's other ones too. We talked about the trickster. It can come in handy in some situations. The nurturing energy of the mother, that's an archetype. The mother. Some of these, there are thousands of these archetypes, but many of them are latent and they're dormant. And some of them manifest, some of them express. And the one that expresses the most in Western society is the hero. Because it's all about functional utility, and let's get some stuff done, and let's accomplish goals, and let's climb up the corporate ladder of success, and let's fill up my bank account, and let's get everybody thinking I'm great, and to hell with, that's all material stuff. To hell with, heroes are not known for, inner reflection and spiritual growth. And I'm sorry, I didn't show the slide that had the 4 quadrants where you had, all the archetypes in this quadrant, and that quadrant, and you could, they'd sort of group them together. The trickster? Yes. The trickster pokes fun. The trickster, this is the gesture, right? With the king and the queen's court. But it pokes fun to, it kind of like, it's not woke. And it tries to get people's attention and call their attention to, there's a lot of creativity going on. There's a lot of mischievousness going on. Is mischievousness? Sometimes it can be. And it has some value under some circumstances. Yeah. When you say crow, do you mean an actual bird, or do you mean metaphorically a crow? Yeah. Okay, so the appearance of animals, see, that's symbol. So what does the crow symbolize? So that's the unconscious talking. Yeah. Yeah. So notice and heed. Okay. I'm hearing discernment. That's what comes to my mind. Discernment. And the trickster can help. A Mason hall. Yeah. So what did the crow symbolize? I mean, what, like... Okay. Oh, fascinating. So that's meaning making. Yeah. Yeah. Noticing and heeding. But another, I think I think we are way over time here. Anybody else? Okay, yeah. Thanks for coming. And thanks, Abraham. Abraham, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for organizing.